And for more on sexual harassment scandals keep on popping up almost every day, we're now joined in our Beijing studio Huang Zhengyu, former White House fellow. And in Chicago, we are joined by Laura Schwartz, author and commentator who worked for the Clinton administration. And also in New York City, we have Christopher Chambers, professor of journalism from Georgetown University. I want to welcome the three of you. Let's go to you, Ms. Schwartz. What do you make of this series of scandals about sexual harassment, both inside the Beltway and in Hollywood?
It's an incredible, serious subject right now in America and around the world, and that's why I applaud you, Tian, for bringing this up on your program, World Insight. You know, over the last years, women still are getting paid only 79 cents on every dollar that a man makes. There's been suppression sexually among genders here in America that hasn't been spoken about. And whether or not these allegations are from 20 years ago, 2 years ago, or 2 days ago, it's important that they're being brought to the front line. I believe there's a couple of reasons. One, news media that has wanted to report these issues, these series of scandalous affairs and improper positioning, finally have the legal structure and the backbone to print such stories, even when it's naming a high power profile person in Hollywood or in the news media or in politics. And so I think we're seeing these stories come to print and on air now because we've evolved in the media, and I think it's also because women are just tired of being suppressed any longer. They're making 70 cents on the 79 cents to every dollar, and they're saying, that's it, we're going to stand up for ourselves. And it's difficult for these women to come forward. I'm glad that they are, and I think it's setting a new precedent, both here in America and around the world, for women to stand up for themselves and their rights.
Of course, there has to be an angle of studying it from the gender perspective. But on the other hand, Mr. Chambers, how much has the media industry been plagued by the sexual harassment that has been going on for decades? Is this going to only once in a lifetime explosion of these scandals that is being publicized to the public, or this is likely to address some of the root causes that have been leading to these scandals? This, I guess, is the fundamental question.
Well, the root causes, of course, go back to gender power relationships and sexual relationships. And in the case of Judge Roy Moore, who's running for United States Senate, the confluence of all that in certain sexual deviant behavior. But really what's going on here is a confluence of technology, social change, political change, you know, with President Trump coming in and his reputation in New York for almost 4 decades. So it's almost a perfect storm of all these things coming together: a generational social change, technology, social media, but also the irony of the media itself having to turn a camera or a notepad or on itself, because you have high-level media people, men, who have been doing this for years. And so you also have that aspect of it. So it's an amazing perfect storm of all these forces coming together, and it's perfect for somebody like me who studies it, because it's absolutely it's both disheartening and awful, but it's also fascinating from a study point of view, because it's an amazing point in history to see this.
Absolutely, but still the question is, Mr. Huang, in our Beijing studio, only a temporary cyclone, or actually the effect of this, the revelations, going to last long to eradicate, at least to a certain extent, the root causes that are leading to it?
I think this is just the beginning, especially because of the fact that midterm elections are coming up. And when it comes to politics, you know that opposing parties will use whatever is available. And we're already beginning to see that. Not just inter-party, meaning between the two parties, but intra-party as well. So inter-party, we see it on the Republican side, Roy Moore. On the Democratic side, Al Franken. But intra-party is even more interesting. We just saw it with John Conyers, right? The younger generation actually want to use this as potential opportunity to come up and become leaders themselves. So I think this is only the beginning.
But that could be used as just a political tool. So, Mr. Schwartz, addressing to what you were relating to, try to eradicate the sexual harassment cases and scandals in politics. That seems to be only temporary, according to what Mr. Huang just analyzed.
Yeah, I really believe that it's not only a fascinating time with this issue, I think it's very empowering time for women when it comes to this issue. There's workplace sexual harassment that happens, yes, on hours, during work time. There's sexual harassment after and before work time, and sexual harassment outside of the workplace altogether. I believe that this will institute new structures, both internally and externally in members of Congress's offices, in the media brands, and others, to address this issue, because it can't be a flash in the pan.
It cannot be, but Mr. Schwartz, you remember it much better than I do. You worked for the Clinton administration. There was even an impeachment scandal against the president, and that issue about gender equity and sexual harassment has been raised for decades, and now you see another coming back of another wave. But will this wave be temporary, or it will go away very soon, Ms. Schwartz, after midterm election?
No, I don't think it's going to go away very soon at all. We've seen the hashtag #MeToo campaign rise up through social media that is liberating women to tell their stories, because they feel like they're believed and they feel like they're being taken seriously, and that is wonderful for this. It's a terrible issue, but it's a really smart step in the right direction, both to tell those millennials, the newcomers to the workplace, and those that have been there for years and quiet about it, that this is not right. And the backbone of these organizations and the steps that they take. Charlie Rose, the media interviewer who was just fired, it took 17 hours from that first story to him being fired. And I think you're going to see much swifter action following beyond. And this is not going to fall off the radar screen at all.
Mr. Huang, do you agree with that? This is not going to be temporary?
No. Well, actually, I agree with that very much. However, there's...
You agree with that, or you hope you would agree with that?
I do hope, because it's such an important issue. Now, my only concern is some of the fundamental causes. I don't know right now we have the perfect environment,
for example,
to actually discuss. You know, for example, in Silicon Valley, we've had a similar topic, which is around the intelligence of women, whether if they're equally capable in science and technology. And we know that there was an engineer who wrote an article on this topic, and he was fired. And so I think this topic is so important that at some point I think we need to calm down and be able to focus on discussing the root causes. And right now I think the trend is to dig up the issues versus focusing on what's happening and why is it happening and why is it so persistent and how do we move past it.
Dig up the issues is mainly about digging up the names, I guess, Professor Chambers.
Well, yes, you have a media model in the United States that mirrors the political model, where it's about that gotcha kind of journalism, you know, to get more eyeballs on the site, to get more people watching, as was said, to get more digging up for the sake of digging up, but not digging up for the sake of healing or studying or eliminating the behavior and getting the people who are perpetrating it out and empowering women. So it's about getting people, it's about digging things up. And that's parallel to what's going on in politics, where it's not discussions about how we can make things better, or these power relationships between men and women, or older men and younger women, or getting more women to vote and get some of these guys out of here who are doing this. It's about gotcha. It's about sensationalism.
Right.
So we have a long, long way to go before we get to the root cause in the United States.
Right. If it is about the name dropper, if it is about just digging up for the digging up's sake, Ms. Schwartz, there is a big danger for those women who are coming out and participating in the Me Too campaign, because at the end of the day, this kind of cyclone, temporary only, going to come to an end. It was going to be them eventually going to suffer, whether professionally or politically, for coming out into the public. Ms. Schwartz.
Well, you know, Rosa Parks sat on the front of the bus during the civil rights movement and started a series a big wave to discuss civil rights and get to the root of this ugly, ugly war between blacks and whites. I think we're seeing that now, too, with the women that are coming out. Not just the women that are coming out when it comes to Harvey Weinstein or Roy Bloom in Alabama, but the women that are starting to address their HR, their human resource directors within their offices in Paducah, Kentucky, and Sheboygan, Wisconsin, and other places. I believe that this will instigate both political change on Capitol Hill with programs in states and communities to empower women both in the accessibility to study STEM programs, for example, science, technology, engineering, and math, so that the women can be equipped. Same thing with addressing equal pay. Like I said, currently it's 79 cents on the dollar, even though the Equality Act was passed in 1969. It is 2017, and it is time to create the structures to build up communities, both in education, economic disparity, and really looking at how to address the issue before it becomes an issue.
Well, Ms. Schwartz, I would agree with 100% about what you just said. I'm sure the other gentlemen do too, but the question is, it's probably not exactly what's going to happen, because we haven't seen much at all. Ms. Schwartz, the institutional building, as you just mentioned, the discussion at all on the Capitol Hill regarding this. Mr. Huang, what is your sense?
Well, you know, I come from a corporate world, and I could say in the corporation, I love the discussion to be more around how do we build those institutions. For example, human resources, traditionally very weak. So if I'm harassed by my boss, who do I turn to? Right? If I turn to human resources, I will want it to be independent and strong enough to actually stand up against my boss. And currently, most corporations, human resources is not structured as such. Now, I haven't seen that type of discussion about how to fundamentally build sustainable institutions, and I hope very quickly we could move there versus digging up names and focusing on the sensationalism.
Digging up the name is important because we need to let them reveal. But, Professor Chambers, as you may know, in Capitol Hill, there is the rule earlier that a woman come out about sexual harassment. The investigation about that is about 90 days. During those 90 days, she will be suspended from her work or still work in the same office as she would accuse the, the congressmen or women that have been doing that. So, and exactly after that, all of this will be paid by the taxpayers' dollars rather than the one that has been accused of sexual harassment. So all of these very weird rules that are still existing, and there is not that much change, it seems, for now, institutional building, as Mr. Huang and Ms. Schwartz just mentioned.
Well, ironically, Senator Al Franken was, had come out in front of reforming that process, and there's a lot of weird things going on with the accusations against him too. But I will say that it's good that he at least put that issue out there when he was accused. However, I don't know how it's going to change up on Capitol Hill, because the inertia and the hypocrisy there is very thick. I mean, as you know, I'm usually in Washington around this, in the middle of this, but I'm here for Thanksgiving, and I'm glad I'm away from it, because it makes me angry, because there's really it's almost like an iceberg to move. And they're the only, ironically, the only bipartisanship that you will see among some of these senators and representatives is their resistance to change of this process. Now we're having younger people come in, and more women, and more cooperation between Democratic women and Republican women. Then you will see it, but it will be very, very slow change.
Okay, on the other hand, Mr. Huang, there's always another side of the story, isn't it? I mean, how would this process, political process, be able to avoid some people just use sexual harassment as political tools to against the opponent? While those harassment might be wrong, might be not real, it will be able to also destroy a politician's reality for higher office, at least for now, during the midterm election, Mr. Huang.
I think that's probably impossible to do.
Really?
Right now we're in a climate where if there's enough accusations, most people will automatically assume. And probably 80–90% rightfully so, but I think there's that 10% that are inappropriately accused. I think one of the key things we do have to focus when the dust settles is around training and definition, because I think there's still quite a bit of gray area. I think coming out of this, people will understand, you know what, overt sexual harassment is not going to be tolerated anymore. But what about the gray area? What about, for example, putting your arm around your female colleague, like you do with a male colleague? Is that okay? Is that not? I think there's some finer points that we do need a lot of training, not just for the older generation, but for the newer generation as well.
Right. At the end of the day, after even the change of those politicians inside the Beltway, it does not mean that things are necessarily going to get better. It only means there's a new generation coming out into the office. Ms. Schwartz, what do you make of that potential?
Well, I have to say strategically, this could not happen at a better time because, as the gentleman mentioned, he's out of D.C. for the week. It's Thanksgiving. It is a Thanksgiving recess, and all the members are back in their district, and they are going to be hearing about allocating taxpayer dollars to fight these harassment charges within Congress. They are going to be hearing about women not having the same respect in the workplace, and I truly hope that that drives election campaign platforms for the midterms coming up in just under 1 year. This has got to be part of the dialogue, and I think that we'll see that increasingly happen. Then when they get elected on that dialogue, they've got to make it come to reality. I do see real physical bill changes and legislation, as well as corporations getting together in the next 1 to 5 years. I think that this strategically will develop into policy. And like was just mentioned, defining that gray area, not just for the generation that's in place right now, but for generations to come.
Laura Schwartz, Huang Zhengyu, Christopher Chambers, thank you so much for joining us. And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, try to find us, World Insight CGTN, into your search engine, or check out our YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Sina Weibo. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Insight team, thanks for watching, and tune in again next time for insights across China and around the world. Good night.